So the session here towards Open RAN deployments at scale. Please, Sadayuki, come. So we have right now, we have 3 of 5. We're 2 missing. Let's see. Let's see who we're looking for. I think we're looking for Mark Atkinson if you're here, and Rob Sony as well.
Rob is.
Here we are. And Mark is coming. Okay, fabulous. We have everybody. Welcome, Rob. Thanks for joining us. So the session here, well, Mark, oh, here he comes, look. What an entrance. They're playing your tune, Mark. Please, have a seat. Okay, gentlemen, please take a seat. So the session here is towards Open RAN deployments at scale, applying operational experience. I think the kind of working hypothesis is, as operators get more experience, using and operating O-RAN, that will enable larger deployments over the next half of the decade. The session format's going to be a little bit different here. There are no slides. I'm going to ask each person to do a few opening statements, and then we're going to move a little bit more to a discussion type format. As before, we're going to take some Q&A. Please, with your name and affiliation, will be very helpful as well. So it's a terrific panel. I'm not going to introduce everybody individually, but just ask you to do so as I bring you in, starting with Sadayuki Abeta from NTT Docomo and OREX. Sadayuki, please go ahead. Tell us, you have, I think, one of the, if not the biggest multi-vendor base station deployments in the world. I guess a good starting point would just tell us a bit about your operational experience so far.
Thank you. First, my name is Sadayuki Abeta, Chief Open RAN Strategist of NTT Docomo, and also the City of OREX. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. So I'd like to share that NTT Docomo experience first. So NTT Docomo developed 5G network 2020, and we use that O-RAN Alliance interface, open interface. And we have the day one, we have the one CUDU vendor and 2 RU vendors. So that is that day one, which we use. But thanks to the open interface, now we have the 4 CUDU vendors and 4 RU vendors. The number of the RU itself, I think we have the more than 30 different type of the RUs that is already installed our network. And the network itself already widely deployed, so nationwidely we deploy 5G network. And the number of customers for 5G exceed, I guess it's 50 million, so many 5G customers already enjoyed our network. And we also introduced the SA and the NSA. So the one thing I'd like to say that our network fully multi-vendor interoperable network. So even the different vendors' equipment, we supported interoperability in front fall, but not only the front fall, but for the X2 interface. Because we support NSA. NSA, we needed to support the interoperability between the 4G and the 5G through the X2 interface. And we have the 4G legacy network, but on the top of our 4G legacy network, we deploy 5G network. That means that we support X2 interface. With that, the partners, I think also the partner is here. So, that is that I believe that this is the biggest, multi-vendor network. But why we can say that the people worry about how the multi-vendor network does work? Well, we have already done, and we did see that significant problem to introduce the multi-vendor network. And of course, that we need some test to introduce the multivendor network. For example, we need to interoperate test between the CU and DU and RU. And first test back to the 2019, honestly, it takes more than 6 months because specification, O-RAN specification itself is fixed in the 2019. So we use that one, but still the vendor's interpretation is slightly different, so it takes some time. Mm-hmm. But the 2020, we did some new CUDU vendor and RU vendors. But the best case is we takes only 1 week. Actually, that company next to me, they are using that equipment. We took only 1 week to complete 1 core and the peak throughput. So specification is O-RAN Alliance is now stable, and we can use that to different vendors ORU.
Okay, so let's leave it there. I'll come back to you in a moment, but that's kind of good evidence that multi-vendor system can work and work very well. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you have a demanding customer base as well, so that should be clear. Mm-hmm. We'll come back to you in a moment, Sadayuki. I'm going to go to Rob Sony at AT&T. Rob, perhaps you could bring us a little bit up to date on where you are with O-RAN, and then if I could just give a little follow-up. I guess my question for you is, why does O-RAN scale specifically matter to you when AT&T is this huge network already? You have good scale, even before O-RAN came along.
So first, thank you. Thank you for inviting me and allowing me to be together with these esteemed colleagues and partners. Enjoyed working with them for the last few years on O-RAN technology in a variety of different roles in a variety of different companies. So I'm only 2 years in, a little bit more than that at AT&T. But at the same time, the last year, I think we can report rather significant progress in AT&T's march towards availability of O-RAN technologies. I think our approach is a little bit different, perhaps, than what I hear a lot of times. It's not open front haul driven, it's open network management driven. So for us, the fundamental foundation actually to be behaving open is to create a platform, an environment where others can participate and we can manage in a single way. One of the biggest problems we have downstream is finally managing all of these partners. So stability of the platforms themselves that actually allow for other partners to enter and exit the network are really important. Without that, you will fail. So from our perspective, yeah, we are now in the middle of launching our SMO platform itself. It will be widely available in our network later this year. We've announced a number of application partners, and we're working closely with Ericsson, particularly in support of those partners and developing an ecosystem, developing a plan, a promise, and a capability for those app partners to be able to innovate so that they can gain scale. Not just working specifically on the Ericsson SMO platform, but also working through the lab we established in Dallas, the center of the universe. Anyone from Dallas in here? Yay. No? Nobody agrees? Dallas is the center of the universe?
There's always someone from Dallas.
I just moved to Dallas in September. It's been fun to transition there, and one day wake up and it be 80 degrees, and the next morning wake up and it's 13 degrees. I'm not kidding, that was within 3 days of each other, and that was in January? Okay. It's a different place, an exciting place, and it's a place where it has a strong telco heritage. And for those of you who've been in the telco world for a while know Dallas is an important place. A lot of companies centered there, and of course we're centered there. AT&T is centered there. We worked with NTIA and through the Public Wireless Innovation Fund, together with our partners Verizon, Docomo, and Jio, we built a lab, 22 ecosystem partners, some of which are in our network, some of which are not, to accelerate the availability of O-RAN technologies and to demonstrate to the world that it's no longer an R&D problem, it's an IoT problem. And this is huge, because for us to be able to demonstrate that, we need scale. Otherwise, what happens is everything becomes a one-off, an R&D project, which is not good for the industry and it's not good for us. We also announced our ability to consume both Fujitsu and Mavenir radios in our network, and we're planning on introducing them later this year in our network. This will be the first time we've had radio and baseband in a significant volume or scale from a different baseband and radio provider. We're already, though, anyways, have introduced a number of O-RAN elements together with our partners, Corning and CommScope, who are now Amphenol and Airspan. I'm very excited to see them also be managed now specifically by the same platform. So this enables us to manage radio, DAS, small cells, and RAN under a single platform environment, but also enable third-party applications to be successful in this. Of course, we are looking forward to introducing Cloud RAN later this year in our network itself commercially. We announced about a year ago, we did our first call on the Ericsson platform for Cloud RAN. Again, not far from the center of the universe, Red Oak, Texas. We did that roughly a year ago. And so we've made some progress, and we've entered the lab with a commercial solution specifically for them now and driving towards scale. So yeah, scale absolutely matters. For us, we have worked not just within our ecosystem, and I think the challenge is if you stay 100% focused on your ecosystem, the reality is the other operators don't necessarily benefit from that. They also don't get the scale, and we've been able to leverage the work done by the Docomo team. They've been instrumental in helping us move forward in the Accord Lab and move the ecosystem partners, but we're also working with a variety of operators, not just through the ORAN Alliance and through the Accord Lab, but also now through the Telecommunications Infrastructure Project, reestablishing that as a place where ORAN work can be done. And I think it will be at least known fairly soon that the focus of that will shift on the ORAN piece towards SMO, and really about enabling multi-vendor SMO. That should be something that we expect to see. And then again, it comes back to, we need to create the scale for the disruptors. We need to create the scale for the incumbents to be able to enter our network. But we also need to create the environments where they can plug and, I hate that word, but I'm going to say it anyways, plug and play. It's not a plug and play environment today, but we need to get to a space where finally we can get reasonable timeframes, reasonable durations for when we introduce new hardware and new software capabilities in the network, whether it's at the application layer for the SMO, whether it's at the cloud infrastructure layer, in particular enabling other companies, new entrants like Wind River or Red Hat to participate and support the RAN. We see good positive stories around them. And then finally to provide the scale opportunities for others to enter our network on the radio side. And we have lots of opportunities to do that going forward as we introduce new frequencies in our network.
Fabulous, thank you, Rob. I'm going to turn to Bernard at TELUS. Bernard, scale of a different problem, I guess, in Canada, a vast country, but I think I'm not unfair in saying TELUS is, on global terms, kind of a mid-size operator in terms of population and revenue. You've got a lot to cover there.
Yeah, that's right, Gabriel. Just for context, in Canada, the government asked us to remove equipment from a Chinese supplier. And so we are about halfway done with traditional infrastructure, and we're doing the other half with Open RAN and vRAN, 4G and 5G without any proprietary equipment. And you're right, Gabriel, Canada is as big as Western Europe. We only have 40 million population, and we cover 15% of the land mass because the rest is the wild and cold areas. But ultimately, we still cover 99% of the population. We don't have the same site grid as in many Asian countries or even in Europe. And so when we started to deploy ORAN and vRAN, we were a little bit worried about the performance at the edge because we have a lot of edge. Our site grid, our sites are far apart, and you need to have really performing network functions to be able to provide the type of performance that our customers require. So good news, as soon as we started deploying ORAN and vRAN, we were already reaching our targets in terms of performance, in terms of availability, so very, very happy about that. When it comes to scale, as you said, we're not very large. We're about 10 to 15% of the size of the biggest US operators, to give you an idea of where we are. And yet, we have been able to move forward quite significantly on ORAN and vRAN. As it stands today, our deployment is going really well. We've been able to ramp up to our scale, which is not the same scale as very large operators. We have 5% of our network that is ORAN and vRAN, and we're going to have 18% by the end of the year. We're going to be at 50% by the end of 2027, And in 2028, 2029, we're going to remove all of the traditional baseband that we have. And at that point in 2029, we will be 100% O-RAN and vRAN for 4G and 5G. So we're really happy about where we are. And if I may, I'm going to just talk a little bit more about what you say about scale, because we're not very large, as we said. I think what's most important is the attitude of your partners. If you've got partners that are really there to support you, there to fix issues as soon as they arise, this is what leads to success in an O-RAN and vRAN deployment. And thankfully, we have good partners, and I'm just going to name them very rapidly because they've been awesome in supporting TELUS in our deployment. It's Samsung Networks. It's Intel Sapphire Rapids platform running on an HP server. We're using Wind River. And we have radios from both Samsung and a small company that's called BMI. And the goal, like I said, we're probably not as, how could I say it, rigorous as some of the very, very large operators. Our attitude is to move forward and resolve issues as they arise. And up to now, it's worked out really well for us. Our partners and ourselves were very involved. As soon as there is a problem, we resolve it, and we move on, and we continue with our deployment. And our deployment is actually going to be pretty good. And keep in mind, TELUS is operating 9 channels of LTE per sector, 3 of NR, and soon to be 5. And our performance is totally meeting our requirements.
Fabulous. Thank you, Bernard. Do we have before I go on to Gerardo, do we have a burning question from anybody? And keep the mic person on his or her toes. Okay, we'll start thinking them up because we're coming back to the audience in a minute. Gerardo at Qualcomm, give us your point of view then on scale in the O-RAN ecosystem. I mean, let's just leave it at that, and then I'll drill in a little.
Yeah. Thanks, Gabriel, and good morning, everybody. So I think one aspect that maybe it's a little bit unique for us is you don't have scale if you don't have a semiconductor and chipset solution that can support O-RAN protocols at the right performance, at the right power consumption, right? That's a key component. It's a foundational aspect. You can define very mature specification and so forth, but if you don't have the platform from a chipset and software perspective, which is at the right price point, at the right TCO, at the right power consumption, then operator will not deploy Open RAN because it's simply too expensive and too power hungry and so forth, right? So that has been our focus and our investment in the last 5 years, I guess. And we are very happy with what we achieved so far. I think we have, talking about scale, last fall we have launched a commercial service in Vietnam based on our platform with Viettel, a great partner. And that's really a full Open RAN, massive MIMO deployment at scale because there's going to be a nationwide new 5G network in Vietnam. So we're talking about 20,000 plus sites, right? And this also speaks to some critics that they say Open RAN is not good for massive MIMO. Well, Open RAN is good for massive MIMO, and we have proven that, and people can travel to Vietnam and prove out, right? So that's an example of how if you work with key partners like Viettel, and if you invest in the right technology from a silicon perspective, then you can enable a high-scale ecosystem on that perspective. I think the other deployment that they are working towards is with Docomo in Japan for their vRAN project, and also with Oryx, with Abeta-san. So on that front, we are working with the NEC, with HP, with AWS. And again, right, if you think about these two networks are very different in the sense that you see Vietnam is a network that, of course, as I said, high performance because it's massive MIMO, but where, of course, it's a new network, it's a developing country, and so very cost sensitive, right? And so we demonstrated that Open RAN can be deployed in such a network with those targets. And then this year we're going to deploy in Docomo, which is, I think, known to everybody as the toughest network to be approved for. So that demonstrates also the quality of the product and the performance that an Open RAN solution can achieve, right? So these are just two real examples, meaning we have deployed last year, we are deploying this year, of scale deployment that with the right partnership, with the right technology, I think Open RAN can cover every single use case that we can think of at the right cost structure at the right performance. And I think I want to go back. For us, one key foundational technology is making sure that every newcomer, every disruptor has also access to the best silicon technology. Because if somebody wants to enter the RAN market and has to rely on old silicon technology, they're never going to be able to compete with incumbent, right? So that's how we are opening up, from our point of view, the ecosystem, and we have great partners in NEC, Fujitsu, Mavenir, and others.
Okay, good stuff, Gerardo. When you announced Viatel, I followed up with them, as we do, you know, sometimes when I hear a vendor story. It took me a good while, actually, to get through. It had to go up the chain. Eventually, it went to the board to send back, you know, some comments, but they did confirm, yeah, they're very ambitious, and they have a big rollout plan. So that took like 2 months for me to
You should have asked me.
I did ask you, but I thought, well, I'll double check, you know, no doubt.
No, I would have put in contact.
It's a very big deployment coming there, given their time in the cycle. Mark at Nokia. So Open RAN for you. I mean, is it? I've been really nice to everybody. I was a little bit sharper with you. You know, is it a case that Nokia, you're already one of the big scale vendors? You have huge product volume, you have a great supply chain, you're nimble on that side. With O-RAN coming in, is this not essentially fragmenting the market a little bit and taking some of your volume away?
Wow. Great question, and good morning, everyone. Delighted to be here on behalf of the network supplier community. As we know, not all suppliers are the same when it comes to Open RAN. You've got the scale tier 1 suppliers, as you said. Some are doing more than others. We'll leave it there. Then you've got a lot of the smaller companies who either want to play in baseband or in radio or in both. One thing that we need to kind of put on the table immediately is Open RAN is not a new technology. Right? The foundation of everything we do is RAN. RAN needs to work. RAN delivers performance. It delivers efficiency, scalability, security, robustness, all of those things. And I don't think there's any operator in the world that would say, I'm willing to go backwards or compromise in any of those things because of Open RAN. So how do we do Open RAN? Then we open up interfaces around the RAN that works to enable multi-supplier deployment scenarios. And from the offset, we had a very concrete plan as Nokia to focus on opening up on the baseband side. Why? Because we believe there's a stronger opportunity to integrate third-party radio suppliers than there is for third-party baseband suppliers to succeed in this space. And we've seen many names pop up since the beginning of 5G. Many of them are still around in some marketing context, but most of them don't have a real business when it comes to baseband. And it's because it's pretty damn difficult what we do. We spend a few billions a year in R&D, so do Huawei, so do Ericsson, maybe the others a little bit less. But you need to have a lot of scale in revenue to be able to fund a big R&D machinery and do everything which the operators need to be competitive to monetize their networks. So we got to a point about a couple of years ago where we were able to integrate third-party radios with our products, and we have some very successful customer deployments ongoing right now where we have a multi-vendor scenario of Nokia baseband combined with third-party RF. Deutsche Telekom in Germany is one example we're super proud of, which was announced earlier in the year. Docomo in Japan, which was a perfect example of where Open RAN makes sense. Docomo deployed at the beginning of 5G with an incumbent supplier, then decided over time that they needed more performance, and they were able to get more performance by replacing the baseband whilst keeping all of those radios on the tower. And of course, everyone knows the expensive thing in terms of swaps or modernization is when you need to touch a physical tower site and climb and disrupt the network performance and users and so on. So to come back to your question, that we believe Open RAN is a vehicle for us to actually grow our business rather than being concerned that it will constrain our business. And as a whole, we see that the opportunity is there to cooperate with different suppliers, both in the macro radio as well as indoor solutions. That, however, has a problem in itself, that there are not that many radio companies around. When you look in the kind of global view, there are some companies where kind of everything points back to one or two companies in China. Then there are NEC and Fujitsu, who are extremely good in what they do, but don't have the massive scale of the tier one suppliers. And you don't need just R&D capability, you need scale of supply chain, you need to place orders to component suppliers 1 year in advance in order to get what you need. So this ability to be able to not only develop good technology, but be able to deliver good products needs to be taken in context as well. Maybe a last word, and not all operators are equal in the Open RAN sense. There are some operators like Docomo that say, I want to be the integrator. I'm ready to take basebands, I'm ready to take radios, and then I'm ready to take accountability myself for making the network perform. There are others who would rather say, I want one supplier as a prime, but I would like sub-suppliers behind them, and you take over that work. And so we, for instance, have Fujitsu radios in Nokia R&D processes, labs, and we treat them like Nokia products, because that's the way every 3 months you get a new release out of the door and ensure that the release delivers the performance, scalability, all of those things I spoke about.
Good stuff. Very good answer. I was two-pointed, wasn't I? But I think the point you make about scaling R&D is obviously critical. I mean, it's very hard. I mean, we've got Gerardo as well, no doubt. Humongous R&D budget but behind it. And I think your point on the supply chain, I remember back to COVID when actually networks carried on and were built, and it was a phenomenal success. And it was because we had these big vendors with supply chain and the inventory and logistics really to get it done. Do you feel, Mark, that you've had, obviously that answer to me is like you've embraced it, you see an opportunity to grow your business. Do you feel like you've had a clear enough steer from the customer base about what particularly they want, what's priority for them? Is it very diverse, or are you now clear in your mind what are the priorities?
I think so. We have different flavors of customer. We have some customers who want to do it because you can do it. So there's not a technical or business rationale. There are others that want diversity of supply chain. There are others who think they can get to better cost points by having different suppliers. And so once you have the technology, then it becomes a business discussion. And of course, we have different business discussions with different players in the industry. I was actually very, very interested to hear from Rob and the focus on the SMO as well, that typically we try to push the O-RAN discussion as an industry to open front haul, but actually Open RAN is a lot more than open front haul. We're talking about virtualization, we're talking about SMO, and we need to embrace openness in each of those things. Are we the poster child in every area? For sure not. So we've taken our time in some of these versus others, but we have clear plans where we're going with all of them.
Okay, good stuff. Do we have a question from the audience? There's a couple. There's a gentleman in the middle here. Go there first. And they're going to bring you a microphone, I think. I'll tell you, we'll come back to you. While they bring the microphone out, let me pick up on the cloud or vRAN point, and I'll go to Bernard and then to Beta-san. Bernard, just to clarify your comments, I think I understood well, but you were talking about by 2029, or let's give you till 2030, you're going to be 100% vRAN. Is that the objective?
Yes, and we're going to keep the radios of the tower that are traditional radios, and we're going to have a C3 to EC3 converter. We're starting our first few sites this year, and everything is going to be vRAN and ORAN. Any new addition on those sites that are traditional RAN are going to trigger automatically a conversion to vRAN and ORAN from the baseband with these converters.
And maintaining the radios, I think that's a little bit like...
Yes,
like
exactly, Mark's right. Vast majority of the cost goes when you need to send crews up the tower. And unfortunately, we've had to go through a few of them in the last decade and a half at TELUS. So we are really allergic now to any vendor lock-in. Not that we want to change vendors all the time. It's absolutely not the case. We are committed to long-term relationships with our suppliers. The key is really having a choice. And in many places throughout the building blocks of ORAN, today we have choices, but we need to make sure that the choices are a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more healthy.
Yeah, okay. So the gentleman, we're going to get your question in just a moment, but I want to bring in Abeta-san on vRAN. Obviously, you've done the front haul part. Give us an update on you mentioned it briefly, but give us an update on where you are there. And obviously, Gerardo gave a little preemptory comment.
So the question is focusing on only the vRAN or Open RAN?
Well, on vRAN.
Oh, okay, vRAN. Yes, we have already deployed the vRAN, but it's still a small area. And we are also adding that one more vendor this year, and we are planning to deploy it. But you know that we already have the 5G network nationwide, and so we gradually include that the vRAN part, and also keeping that traditional vendor part, because for the operators, how we reduce the TCO is important. So not that vRAN is that some advantage, but also we need to consider total cost. So based on that, our deployment strategy, we use both the traditional hardware and also the aperturized hardware.
Yeah, okay, good stuff. So let's have the question in the gentleman in the middle here. She's right there with you now.
All right, thanks. My name is Manish Gange. I'm from HFCL in India. I've been on the supplier side and also on the operator side in the past. One of the goals of ORAN was not only to do the CapEx efficiencies, but the operational efficiencies as well. OpEx cost, really. How do you see, as the operators, where we are heading? Are we really realizing some of the operational efficiency goals with the Open RAN deployment? And mostly because of the softwareization. And thanks for bringing the vRAN into the game.
You don't want to go? Rob, do you want to have a go, and then maybe Bernardo?
It's actually a really good thing to bring up. I think one of the things that we should be very direct about what's working and what's not working in ORAN. So I think there's naturally a temptation to say, oh, look, we stood up 5 vendors. Oh, we set up this lab with 25 people. I'm making fun of myself, actually. It's bullshit. I'm sorry. The reality is it's about automation. It's about security. We introduce all these vendors into the network. We say to ourselves, oh yeah, we can do it. It's simple. It's not. ORAN is transformational both for the vendors as well as for the operators. It changes their way of working. It changes our way of working. We actually have more complexity, which means we have potentially higher operational costs. So people often challenge, why can't you have, now you're open, can't you have 15 baseband vendors in the network? Can't you have 15 chipset vendors in the network? Can't you have 20 radio vendors in the network? Can't you pick and choose? Okay, New York City wants this radio. Los Angeles wants that radio. But we're not there as an industry. And you know why? O1 and O2 are just not mature. And we still very much are in a space where ORAN is not yet focused completely on maturing the O1 and the O2 specifications. Yes, 100% focus on open front haul. But even that, life cycle, Mark made that point. They decided to bring Fujitsu inside of the kimono to say, yes, that's a Nokia product. Why did they do that? Because they wanted to solve a problem for us. They wanted to be able to say, hey, you don't have to deal with the fact that software from here and software from there may not be aligned. So we don't have yet mature processes for automation, but more importantly for security. The more people you have tripping around in your network, the more danger there is overall. I'm not trying to say the boogeyman is here, he is. So the reality is we need to actually be very cognizant of the fact that this is really what's changing about ORAN. And this is why operators are moving slowly. And I know it's hard for the vendors, especially a lot of the disruptors and the non-incumbents to say, hey, how do I jump into this network and how do I gain scale? You have to find a partner. And I'm seeing this consistently with all of the vendors. They find a specific operator partner to gain their own scale in ORAN technology and then grow outward. It's impossible even for them to run in parallel 10 different scale deployments with operators.
Stuff. Anyone want to add to that, or we go to another question? Fella at the back.
Hi. That actually answered a lot of my first question. But just to introduce myself, my name is Dimitri DeSous. I'm a PhD student from Virginia Tech in the United States. And I am actually looking into security of ORAN, especially how you're going from a single vendor configuration to a multi-vendor configuration. Obviously, as you're including a lot more vendors, a lot more mobile network operators, non-teleco vertical industries, your expectations are going to change. Especially in the United States, you're including a lot of like the rules and regulations that have to be considered regionally. So I guess my first question to you would be, what efforts are being done to kind of include I guess, a standardization of all these security requirements for all of these different entities. And then my second question is including the introduction of quantum. So I've looked at your working group 11 documents quite a bit surrounding security over the new interfaces and everything. And I'm noticing that a lot of them, much like most of the 5G network, use asymmetric encryption. Quantum is expected to break asymmetric encryption. So I guess what are you guys doing in preparation for the advent of quantum and quantum attacks?
Okay, so two really good questions, both very difficult, it's fair to say. Thank you. Nagendra, I think he's still here, so you can also try and catch him in the break, which is in 10 minutes. But let's land this, Rob, let's land this on you because you kind of queued him up. And then we'll have whoever wants to join in on the security side. I mean,
I want to respect the other folks here on the panel and be all really short with my answer. But definitely, Virginia Tech is a great partner for AT&T. We work closely with the folks there. So definitely appreciate follow-up if you want to on this topic itself. But in particular, for me, security is not about the interfaces. It's actually about disaggregating hardware with software and creating new threat surfaces, new vulnerability services.
Right.
So the challenge we have is often the ORAN Alliance has been focused on security on the interfaces themselves. Look, we're not separating radio from baseband widely yet, and we don't have across untrusted front haul. That doesn't happen. So worrying extensively about that interface and its security, it's something we do, but we don't over-rotate. At the same time, worrying about our apps going to make an entry point of insecurity in the network, again, another focal point for the ORAN Alliance. It's an important problem, but look, the apps run in our environment. We're going to scan them, we're going to look at them, we're going to secure them. So I don't think that's something that an SDO or a standards team needs to focus on. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunity, I think, overall to look carefully at what does a disaggregated solution really mean, and how do you automate the process of determining whether there are vulnerabilities or not. We're doing a lot of this manually today, and it's painful. So we need to move forward quickly to automated, not just prior detection, but also for intrusion detection, because we live in a different world now, and there are bad actors all over the place. Yeah. So being able to automate that and look for and recognize when things are happening and have forms of anomaly detection. Again, it's a great app, our app use case. It's a great PhD dissertation topic. I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Great.
good stuff. Another question. We've got time for maybe one or two more. There's a gentleman in the front, and then this fella here. Probably not going to go to Rob first for this one, but you can come in later.
Hi, good morning. Hongwei Zhang from Iowa State University. Actually at the Center of AgTech, and so my question relates to how to bring high capacity connectivity to the rural areas and agricultural farms. So one of the challenges there is actually how to provide connectivity at affordable cost. So my question is, given that there's some discussion in the O-RAN community looking at shared like ORU, spectrum sharing, just curious about your take, big and maybe medium-sized carriers about the potential needs, or how you see how that may potentially help, or is that something worth to look at in the commercial deployment, like shared RAM and spectrum sharing?
So Bernard, that's what's got your name written on it, I think.
I think we're already in an environment where there's a lot of complementary solutions, whether it's home internet through satellite or through fixed wireless access from a terrestrial network. I think the difficulty is always going to remain that we've got spectrum that covers really, really far, but with very narrow bandwidth. And then we've got the spectrum that covers not as far, but with a lot more bandwidth, and so on and so forth. So the difficulty is making a good business case while not having to densify the grid. That is really difficult. And for that, you need solutions. So you need solutions where you're going to give as much room in your capacity for people that are at the edge from low-band spectrum. And for that, you need to be able to offload low-band spectrum as much as you can. How do you do that? You extend the coverage of mid-band so you can offload the low-band consumption. And how do you do that? You do that, there's more and more, and you can see it from many different suppliers at the show here, more and more massive MIMO in the FDD bands of the mid-band. We are also seeing some suppliers that are able to create products with maybe 16 TRX in the low band that essentially with multi-user MIMO increases the capacity. So it's all of these things because there won't be more low band spectrum in the future. So we need to rely on technology. Densifying sites is too expensive, even if O-RAN is a little bit less expensive. I think what's exciting, I find, is that hopefully in a few more years, we're going to have more choices with radio suppliers to come up with these products, because the evolution needs to keep on going. In our case in Canada, our traffic grows by about 30%. People that are at the edge, where only low-band spectrum can reach them, still grows by 30% every year. And there is no more spectrum. So we need to rely on innovative antenna technologies to be able to get the best out of the coverage for those people that are far from the sites.
Just want to add a little bit, and it's good to see you. Shared ORU is an academic problem. Why? We'd rather share spectrum. That's what Bernard does. They share spectrum. They don't share radios. Segmenting the radio, creating two different operational planes for two different operators to be on the same radio at the same time, it's an operational nightmare. Try to think about how it would be rationalized in the end-to-end in the network. It doesn't seem actually something we're going to see in this decade. I'd love to be proven wrong. I think you can do a lot more by sharing the radio and creating roaming arrangements and roaming agreements between the operators and sharing the spectrum than sharing the radio. This is what we did with AST Space Mobile. Look, we are direct competitors with Verizon, but we are sharing spectrum with them for space access because we need low-band spectrum. We need it available. If you look at even the model with Starlink, with D2D, it's also a shared spectrum model. So as much as I love the idea, I'm a former academic myself, love the idea of creating all these problems for myself of saying, how am I going to secure this? How am I going to manage this? I honestly don't believe the right approach should be to share the radio. It should be to share the spectrum.
Okay, big topic we can go more into, but let's have a last question from here, please.
Hello, my name is Bence Seres. I'm from One Hungary, which is a service provider in Hungary. My question is, as I understood, you are moving towards a multi-vendor model and scaling up, and as I counted, you have more than 8 vendors in your radio network. What's the the main reason behind that? Is it bringing in competition, or is it because you are innovative and want to test more and more vendors with their own technologies, because it brings in serious operational questions, as my colleagues asked that?
Maybe question to me, right? Yes, one of the motivation is that the competition. So we deploy the different type of network according to that our strategy. So some cases that we needed the small transmission power for indoor, some cases the integrated type, some cases that the machine MIMO. So according to the deployment scenario, we asked the vendors to provide it. And we selected the best solution. Of course, we also need to consider the test cost. So based on that, the total cost, we decide which vendor we will use. And the other reason is that avoid that supply chain risk. So as you may know, that 2 to 3 years ago, there was the semiconductor shortage. And some company had to provide the solution on time. We can keep that our strategy, deployment strategy plan, since we can use that other vendors. So avoiding that so supply chain risk and also the competition.
Good stuff. They've padded us on the time. We've got a couple of minutes, although it's now flashing red. Let me say, is there a last question out there? Chilin in the front row.
Well, we have 3 leaders up there, and also appreciate the 1 year ago, the big news of the 14 billion move into the O-RAN deployment, even though some criticize that it's not multi-vendor version. However, I think it's very clear that as O-RAN technology is multifaceted, it takes time to mature, and also it will need a system integrator. The question is whether the operator itself wants to be the system integrator or partner a professional system integration house to do the job. Or I think in some cases, Ericsson, Nokia, and these traditional equipment manufacturers are actually in the best position to be the system integrator. Of course, we pray that they would be open-minded with open arm to be willing to integrate many other third parties' modules or subsystems into the system. So I'm just wondering if we could have some sort of experience comparison between AT&T's experience and the Docomo's experience, because Docomo from day one seems to took up the system integrator's role. And how is that experience compared to AT&T having a major equipment vendor playing the system integrator role? I think someone says have a prime partner, but it's basically the system integrator, I would say.
I'll tell you, let's do that. But could I perhaps suggest we ask Gerardo just to give us a little bit of a perspective on the support you had to give out to Viettel? I mean, it's quite an interesting case.
So
I'm not saying you're a system integrator, but tell us how you're involved in supporting
the Viettel case, I think the question is very good, and I can provide the 2 different examples of the network that we deployed so far. And the Viettel case is a case where the operator took ownership of the system integration, right? So Viettel with the VHT, which is Viettel High Tech, which is how the vendor inside Viettel, the operator, they took the ownership of doing system integration. It's an open run, single vendor solution in that case, even though Viettel provides the layer 2 and layer 3 software, and Qualcomm provides the layer 1 software. So there is some diversification in the software stack, but that is the case where the system integration is done in Viettel. In the case of the work that we're doing with Docomo, I think it's a combination of NEC and Docomo being the system integrator. So it's a kind of a case-by-case scenario. I think it will depend eventually by, we have, as you said, a different kind of operators. Some tend to have I don't want to say abandon, but stop investing in the system integrator capabilities, so they will have to rely more on prime vendors or third-party system integrator. Some, I think we were part with the millimeter wave deployment of Rakuten a few years ago, and even in that case, Rakuten Mobile was the system integrator, right? So some operators still have that very, very strong skill, and I think they are great leaders on that.
I bet I'll come to you in a moment, but I want to bring Mark in first. Mark,
Thank you. Maybe a little bit of context from our side as well, that there are two clear worlds that I see. There's the world where the operator has R&D capabilities and is willing to integrate themselves, but also take accountability for the outcome. So if field teams see performance issues in the network, it's who do I call? I call the global R&D team within the operator. Or the work of integrating is passed on to the suppliers. And from Nokia's side, we've got a very clear positioning in this, that we're willing and able and happy to be the integrator as long as we're the baseband supplier. Why? Because the baseband is the heart and brain of the network. The radios are the legs and feet. And so if you're having control and knowledge around the heart and brain, you're able to integrate the third parties inside, whereas a third-party IT house would very much struggle because they don't understand RAN.
Okay. Better son, I'll give you a last word, unless Rob, you want to come in and address it.
Yeah. Do you want the last word? I do have some answers, but I'll let you decide. Do you want the last word or the first word?
Anyway, okay, go first.
He wants the last word.
So it's a good question. I think if we think of traditional RAN today, we have turf integration, we have site integration, we have physical integration, we have logical integration. We have software integrated from our vendors with our legacy IT systems, with our technology development systems. We have collectors, we have probes that we integrate. Finally, even at the site, we have to integrate the radio with the baseband once we separated the radio from the baseband. So that happens today, and it happens either physically or it happens via software methods. I think as we see the RAN continue to disaggregate, yeah, there are more integration fronts potentially. But as we've seen with a lot of the operators as they start to deploy O-RAN, with the notable exception, which is why he gets the last word, of Docomo, is they're starting with a single solution as the learning point, as the travel point, and then saying, okay, let me go bring in potentially another server vendor partner. So we use Dell, for example, today, and we're benefiting the fact that Dell and Intel are pre-integrated. In fact, they've been pre-integrated outside of the RAN domain for years. And now it's an integration question for Dell and Intel with Ericsson, both with their CAS layer as well as with the network function layer. So for sure, we will bring integrators in. The question is, for those interior integration points, do you need, should it be a Nokia, should it be an Ericsson, should it be a Samsung? Or if you don't have a dominant baseband player, somebody enabled like the model with Qualcomm, then you're probably going to bring a third party in to do it. So I think those models are going to continue just like we have today for every other part of the network. We already are in the space of either sometimes we either decide we use our own resources, we bring in contract resources, or we rely on our vendors. It's going to be just an extension of it, and what we really hope is finally the software matures to make the software integration seamless.
It's the last word about it.
Thank you. So the answer is actually that up to operators. So our case is that we are the system integrators, but the ORXI actually is bringing the solution to the outside Japan, and all we are talking was that the tier 2, tier 3 operators, they do not have enough capability to do the integration by themselves. So we bring that pre-integrated solution to them and sharing that our integration skill or result as much as possible to reduce the cost as much as possible. So yesterday we had a session together with Vodafone, how we shared or how operator create that ecosystem to sharing that result as much as possible. So for the operators, how to reduce the total cost is very important. So that's then the approaches may be different because the scale of that deployment scenario is different. But we could provide the best solution to that operators.
I have a request because we are trying to set up a ecosystem resource, which is the best practice experience sharing. And we currently only have one operators in Canada that's already come forth and provided their experience sharing as our first best practice. I would like to plead to our leaders up here to consider, as long as it's not proprietary information that you can share, I think would benefit a lot with many of the ecosystem players.
Which working group is this being shared under?
Actually, it's the executive committee that's taking care of this right now.
So direct feedback to the exec committee?
Right.
Okay.
Okay, let's leave that plea in the air. Well made, though. And joining me in thanking all of our panel. Thank you very much.